I am Christy Love, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director for CJCC. And again, I'm glad that you're all here. And it's been, I've enjoyed the program so far, and I hope you have. We're going to dive in, learn a bit more about the programs that our district and federal partners have in place to help ensure successful reintegration for returning citizens. And I'm going to turn it over to Marc Schindler, who is the Executive Director of the Justice Policy Institute, and he is going to be our moderator for this evening.
Thank you so much, Christy. Can folks hear me? This is on? Yeah? Great. Well, terrific to be here. As Christy said, my name is Marc Schindler. I'm Executive Director of the Justice Policy Institute, which is a national research and policy organization here in the district. And that's where people go after they do tough jobs like these folks have. So I had the privilege of serving in district government for a number of years some time ago, and it's great to be back amongst friends, and particularly to see the amazingly talented young people from DYRS. Can we give them another hand? So I'm always just blown away by the talent and potential of the young people, and really also appreciate the DYRS staff who support them and really giving them the platform and the opportunity to show off their talent. So it is a tough act to follow, but we're gonna do our best. I don't think there'll be any singing or dancing for folks up here. If you want to enjoy the program. But I am going to let folks sort of participate how they would like, so we'll see. So we're really we've got some great experts here. I'm not going to do intros. I'm going to let each of the panelists just say a little bit about themselves as we go into the questions. And we're really going to give an opportunity to talk about and learn about the types of services and supports and opportunities that our district and federal agencies provide for our young people and adults coming out of our facilities. We're also going to hear some firsthand perspective on that as well, and I know we're going to have some good back and forth in terms of questions and answers. So with that, I want to just sort of jump right into it, and we're going to start down here with Director Booth, who I guess is going to get up and dance, I guess. No, that's cool. That's cool. So we're just going to open up, and I'm going to ask each of them, and I think Director Booth has a short presentation, to talk a little bit about the programs and services and supports that are available, or their perspective on those services that are provided or have been provided in the past, either in the setting of a jail, a youth facility, a federal facility, and I think Norm can speak a little bit about both in terms of your perspective of what's going on here in the district for both returning citizens and young people. So with that, I'm going to start off with Director Booth.
Sure. I can just go to the podium. Good evening, everyone. I'm Quincy Booth, and I'm the director for the DC Department of Corrections. I like to have visuals because sometimes I actually forget and I sometimes go off script, and so I'm going to try to stick to the script as much as possible. Some of the things that we've done far as building on some of the success that we have at the Department of Corrections, and this is in no particular order, however, it's just a snapshot, and this is not everything that we do, but I just wanted to share with you all this evening. One of the things when we think about reentry, it's really important to connect with families. Essentially, we believe that the jail is a microcosm of the community, and the more that we can make like the community in positive ways, then better off. In our opinion, it's better for the individuals to reunify back into the community. And so one of the things that we've started and relaunched is Family Reunification Day, which is an opportunity for families to come in with community-based organizations to really understand what this road would actually look like. A lot of times we talk about giving people a second chance, but in our opinion, sometimes it's really the first chance as it relates to connecting to services with some of our community-based organizations as well as government agencies. One of the things that I was tasked with when I came on as the director of the agency is that we had, for about a population of, at that time, around 1,800, we had 2 social workers, which I thought was a little criminal because we are not experts at understanding human behavior. And so we've enhanced our social work presence, and we're gradually increasing that as the years go on. And so they're helping us as it relates to developing the programming as well as enhancing our policies because, again, understanding human behavior and human dynamics is important as it relates to the work in which we do. The one other thing, and I have several of my teammates that are here, I am presenting this, but there's a lot of folks that are in the crowd, and so if Team DOC that are part of the family, if you can raise your hand. We have several of the folks that are here, and I'm thankful for you being here. But one of the things that we did in the reorg is creating college to career readiness. Prior to, we just had one thing as it relates to education, and that was really GED and some other small things. And so in our college to career readiness, which we're super excited about, is that we went from GED and a partnership with Howard University to now we have still a partnership with Howard University, a partnership with American University where they do the Inside Out project, a partnership as well as with Georgetown University that we're looking forward to do for credit. All of these are for not for credit, where they offer classes from writing to debating, and I'm going to blank on a couple of others, but essentially they come into our facility and offer classes. The other one with Howard University, they're offering classes with the students. It's the Inside Out project. And then the last one is with Ashland University, where we have an opportunity to work on tablets, and so the transition will continue as they release out of our care. As was stated earlier, it's generally a short-term care that people are with us, and so it's totally different than our sister agency, the Bureau of Prison, where they're there for a longer period of time. But the continuity can continue, whether if it's at Howard or Ashland University, and Ashland, again, is for credit, and we're super excited about the work that's happening there. The GED, as I stated before, goes on to the education, but one of the revamps that we did, and I'm thankful to Deputy Director Lopez that identified this, was that prior to, we were not, if you didn't test at an 8th grade level, then you could not test for the GED. And some of the people that are in our care were not at that level, and so we've already started some of the remedial work to actually get them up to speed to continue the work as it relates to GED and getting them ready for the GED, as well as now in the district we've changed it where it's not just GED, but it's also high school equivalent. Again, celebrating the success because we also have the partnership with DC schools as it relates to our young people that are adjudicated as adults as far as in Title 16, and they have participated and we've celebrated and highlighted a little bit more of their accomplishments. One other thing that we're super excited about this year with the help of our partners over at CJCC is that we applied for a grant, and Director Butler, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been over 9 years, I think, that the district has applied for the grant, and this was the first year that we've actually received the planning grant. And so we're super excited because it's not just with CJCC, but it's several partners. I see Leslie nodding her head because we've tapped with her, as well as CSOSA and other partners that we're working with. And this will allow us to create a framework that is not just around this year as far as reentry planning, but it's multiple years that we'll have a framework that we can operate as a district on what is our collective plan going to be, and hopefully it will yield great outcomes and success. I'm narrowing down. So the one other thing that I thought about, we have partnerships with various community-based organizations that want to come in and talk with our men and women that we have in our care. One of the things that we launched was the master class. It's a fancy way of saying that we're really partnering with the community in a meaningful way, where businesses, or whether if it's PDS, which they've had some folks come in before, and other sister agencies come in and basically do a sort of a lecture series to prepare the men and women as they are applying for jobs. We've also started to do like mock interviews, because one of the things that we've heard from our residents is that one of the toughest things that they can do is really applying for a job, because sometimes they've never filled out an application and or never went on an interview. So the more that we can prepare them in a meaningful and engaging way prior to the actual real thing, the more likely they'll be successful in that endeavor. And this, I literally am wrapping up. One of the things that we were super excited, Deputy Mayor Donahue and I, along with Marc, is that we have participated with Vera, excuse me, not Vera, but Vera was there. It was with Columbia and Harvard University. It's a partnership at looking at the young men between 18 to 25. Specifically, we know with the brain development, they're still young people. However, we treat them as adults, and so there's specialized programming that we need to do. And so it's one of those things that was really interesting. We participated in the program over a year ago. We're now going into our second year. And I told the deputy mayor as well as Marc that we're going to get this up and running. And they said, when? And I said, in a couple of months. And I came back and told the team, we're going to get this up and running. We had an opportunity to go to Chester, which actually started this program in partnership with VEER. And to date, we are about 8 or 9 weeks into the program that has really yielded some great success because we've actually reshaped a lot of our thinking and our work that's been mainly centered around the people. And so this is one of the first times, at least that I can say since I've been there, that we literally went to the young people, specifically on this unit, and said, what will a program, and what are some of the services in which you need? And so it's really driven essentially by the people that's on the unit. So it's a self-governed community that they will say, what are the rules of engagement? What do they want to do as far as a daily agenda? What are some topics that they actually want to talk about? And the list goes on and on. The unique thing about the young adult, and it's actually called the Why Me, which they came up with the name program. What's really unique about this program is that in a setting, in any kind of setting, so I just don't want to say it's a jail setting, but any kind of setting, you're going to have problems and issues regularly. To date, which has been truly a blessing, we've only had one incident on the unit, which is relatively huge for a jail setting because it's very rare that you can have a day without an incident that goes on. And the incident, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm thankful to Deputy Director Patton and her team, it was really around commissary. So it wasn't really anything major. Someone took someone's commissary. However, the community self-corrected and it didn't happen again. And so we're super excited. We've had one cohort, we're now going into our second cohort, and for sake of time, I don't want to necessarily go into the nitty-gritty, but if anyone has any questions, let me know. Just as point of clarification, I think someone mentioned earlier, and I forget exactly who, that said that we don't have program services or stuff going on at the Department of Corrections. I don't know what Department of Corrections they're talking about, but obviously it's not the one here in DC. I personally pride myself in ensuring that we have people that care and love what it is that they do, and I want to make sure that I'm depositing as much as we can into the individuals that's doing the work. Because at the end of the day, we are responsible for their safety, but also responsible for ensuring that they go back into the community in an enhanced way. I don't want to say necessarily better, but we don't want to provide an environment that's not helpful at the end of the day. And so I will hop over that. And then I can just show one last thing. So I think sometimes visually it's helpful for people to see, and this will take just 1 second to actually view. And this is, again, a culmination of all the things that I talked about, but I think it's just images. Maybe not.
It's flickering.
For the sake of time and don't want to have technical difficulties with this, I just will say this. One last piece that I'll say, this is our space in the sense of the jail. And so sometimes people will say, well, we can't go to the jail for a tour, or we can't go to visit, or we can't go to volunteer. Part of Reentry, in my opinion, as I stated earlier, it's a microcosm of the community. So the more that we can have you come in as members, and we heard earlier loud and clear from the amazing job that was done by the young people, we need each other, and we need each other to survive. And so to that end, you are welcome to come in. If you want to see this face to face, please let us know. There's many members of the team that's here, and I'll stop right there. Pass it back.
Thank you, Quincy. I should have said when we started, I'm going to ask folks to hold questions till the end. We'll go through and have everybody make a short presentation. And I thought that, there's so much to talk about, so appreciate you sort of picking some of the spots. Maybe the last thing that Quincy was mentioning in terms of programmings, Director Lacey, was about the young adult population. So maybe that's a good segue to talk about a little bit what's going on at DYRS, particularly in terms of, this theme about making sure that when young people are moving into the community, I know a lot of your young people never go in a facility, but how that transition is happening, what you guys are doing to support that, that'd be great.
Certainly, thank you, and it's a pleasure, honor to be here with a distinguished panelists and a distinguished audience. You know, having this conversation, I'm really proud to be a part of this community and part of this DC government where we are actively rethinking, reimagining what justice itself is and what the various aspects of the justice system can be. And what better way to have that conversation than to ask the question, raise the questions about how are we impacting the people who we're here to serve. You know, one of the questions, I guess thought-provoking questions that was offered to the panelists had something to do with the purpose of incarceration. The purpose of depriving people of their liberty and putting them in institutions that we now know as are called jails and prisons. And I don't want to steal anybody's thunder because we certainly have a panelist who can speak to this issue in terms of the experience way better than I can. But I do think it's worth saying that while we have a lot of work to do and ahead of us, and many accomplishments to describe, which I'll speak a bit about with regards to the young adults and the committed youth to DYRS. This is part of a legacy of a long battle, a long struggle, really, to shift the paradigm which has existed in this country for many years, which has been based on punishment, which has not been based on service or real rehabilitation. I mean, the words are used, have been used for generations, but the outcomes haven't certainly reflected, nor have much of what's taken place inside of the justice system reflected a real, true commitment to the people most impacted by it. And so I think it's important just to put that in context and to understand that we are continuing a legacy of struggle to reform, to change what has been, frankly, very harmful to many communities, particularly Black and brown and Native communities in this country, you know, from its inception. You know, from things going back to even to the end of, well, the original sort of incarceration of Native peoples, but then moving to the convict leasing system, which was really the first sort of justice system for the former slaves, and then the ongoing disparities and discrimination that has characterized the justice system in this country, and with an emphasis on punishment, but not with great emphasis on really providing people what they need to successfully reintegrate into the community. So I'm really proud to be on a panel and be a part of a process where people are really serious about this and really doing the work. You know, as I look at the process that has evolved over time, it's good to see that there is a shift taking place, and certainly within the juvenile justice system, I can speak about that. But we're in the era of mass incarceration, right? I mean, there's a lot of scholarship about it. There's plenty of books, films, you know, the new Jim Crow, 13th, and we could go on down the line about the policies, the war on drugs, the super predator craze, the mythology about urban Black youth, and a number of forces that have sort of contributed to this over-reliance on incarceration. Well, one of the questions was, what should incarceration be? I think at its best, it's an intervention into the lives of people who have demonstrated an inability to safely reside in the community, you know, without causing harm. So if it is in fact an intervention, the question is, what does that intervention look like? Like, what do we provide to those into whose lives we're intervening? We think it would be about an actual healing process, right? A restorative process where they could actually really begin to take account for their actions or the impact that their actions have had on others, to begin to mature, to then begin to actually acquire some skills that could be translated into a viable career when they come home. And so I don't need to say more about how that has been, I think it's been a challenge to really achieve that inside of these systems. I frankly think that that reformers have worked against, you know, a trend, and we are pushing we're pushing, trying to create space, even political space, to say that it's not being weak or soft on crime, to try to help people heal, to try to provide treatment, to provide quality education, to provide vocational skills, to provide conditions and an atmosphere that aren't dehumanizing, that in fact are humanizing, that are building capacity to be able to coexist peacefully in the community. And so that's what this is all about. And I feel privileged to be able to stand on the shoulders of many before me, Marc, Schindler among them, many Cherryl, people in this room who have been fighting to push to transform the system. And so at DYRS, we're building on that legacy and have dared to not just argue that our young people deserve services, or that this approach is smart and actually reduces recidivism and actually has better outcomes. That's obviously part of the argument. But we've dared to say that we're building our work on a principle of love, right? That we love our young people, because our young people are part of our community, and we love our community. And we love safety, and we love peace, and we love the ability for our kids to play safely in their parks, and our elderly to be able to walk the streets safely and what have you. And so that's really been the theme of our work. And I think based on that theme, then we have continued to fashion approaches to working with our young people that rely on such things as high quality education, good food to eat, nutrition, decent living quarters, recreational services, vocational programs, beginning reentry at the point of entrance, right? Which is sort of a cliche in our business, right? But who really does that, or how do we really do that, right? And not that we have it all figured out, but really trying to put reality behind those words. And so by opening up our doors and bringing community to the facilities, allowing not just visitation on the part of families, but really bringing in some of the people you even saw here who helped produce the performance earlier, bringing them in to work with our young people. We do something called the Covenant of Peace, which is actually a weekend retreat inside the facility where we bring in providers, therapists, family members, where we bring in what we call credible messengers, formerly incarcerated people who have now dedicated their lives to working with the young people and working with the community to promote safety and to promote wellness and promote nonviolent resolution of conflicts. And so we try to expose the young people to this full array of relationships, of services, of resources and opportunities to really help them begin to make that transition, to really prepare them for the transition coming home. We're really proud and happy through the Comprehensive Youth Justice Amendment Act that legislation has done a couple of really important things to, I think, move in the right direction. One of the things that it has done is has outlawed the detention of status offenders, known as PINs. These are kids whose crimes are only designated illegal because of their status as being minors, such thing as truancy and running away, which are the big ones, smoking cigarettes or that drinking liquor, those kinds of things. And so decriminalizing these young people, decriminalizing that behavior, but seeing it as a health developmental issue and beginning to provide them treatment as opposed to incarceration as the answer to that issue. And secondly, which Marc raised, was the issue of the young people who are charged as adults. So Congresswoman Gordon talked about that earlier. So now, and as of October 1st of 2018, DYRS will take custody of 16 and 17-year-olds currently charged as adults in the district. And this is not to say, and I don't think the legislation is to imply that Director Booth and his team aren't doing great work or don't care about young people, but it's about what is the age-appropriate approach to work with children, which they are, despite some of the hype, or even despite some of the really dangerous things that they've done, which I don't want to minimize. But the point is that we have made, this is a major shift to begin to frame and see and define young people just as that, and to understand the developmental stage, the brain developmental stage, to begin to think about the trauma that they have experienced that impacts their behavior, and provide them the types of services and attention and resources that we provide all of our young people. So that's a major shift that we're really proud of. And I think I'll pass it on in the interest of time, but I think that, again, it's really important for all of us here, the various agencies that are represented, as well as folks in the audience, to continue to push this reform effort, to push this reimagination effort, because it's not only a reflection of our values of compassion and care and love for our young people, it's certainly that, but it's also producing better outcomes for all of us, right? It's better results. It reduces recidivism. It connects young people and their families and their communities in positive ways. And I think that's what we all agree we're here to do.
Great, thank you, Clint, and I'm really glad you mentioned what's coming up in October in terms of the result of the Omnibus Act, and thinking about, it's been a long time coming, and my sense is, Quincy, you're thinking this is a good thing happening?
Absolutely.
Right? And maybe when we get into the Q&A, there might be some time to touch on, because that's a very big sort of historic thing happening in the district, where our Title 16 kids under 18 are no longer going to be in an adult facility. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So we're going to move from the district to our federal partners. And Ms. Litsey, if you could talk a little bit about what's happening at the Bureau of Prisons in terms of how you think about these issues, particularly as you think about the folks who are in your care returning back to our community here in DC.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there. I know we're getting very close to the end. And I do want to allow time for the audience to be able to ask questions and us answer. I'm here representing Director Inch. When Congresswoman Norton spoke, my staff and I took a lot of notes. We have a lot of homework to do, and we are committed to going back and getting those answers. So the next time she speaks before a group, she'll have some answers for you.
She's good about giving homework.
I would like to touch on the Bureau's reentry programs. I am honored to be in the Reentry Services Division. The Bureau is so passionate about reentry that we have a division that's made up of different components that impact reentry. We have our education branch that's in the reentry division. We have psychology services. We have the National Reentry Affairs branch, which is kind of a general division that kind of touches into all of the other specialty areas. We have chaplaincy services, and we have our residential reentry management branch. And who am I missing? WASP. And formerly known as the Female Offender Branch has now been renamed the Women and Special Populations Branch to cover a variety of demographics that weren't initially covered. And that includes our transgender population, our veterans, our young adults, our female offenders, of course, and the elderly, which is the elderly is covered by our Health Services Division, and we also participate in some of the programs that are provided by Reentry Services Division. Our branches work together with one goal of assisting incarcerated individuals by offering worthwhile programming and skill development for successful return to society. Some of those programs include, and I'm not going to list everything because I don't want to take up too much time, but Alternative to Violence, Assert Yourself, Beyond Violence, and those are programs that are offered that are female-specific programs. Young adult programs include Quest for Authentic Manhood, Anger Management, Basic Cognitive Skills, Criminal Thinking, Inside Out Dad, Victim Impact, and some of our elderly programs include A Matter of Balance, AARP, which I have my AARP card also, Foundation and Finances, Money Smart for older adults, and Talking with Your Doctor. That's just a small list of the programs that are available, but like I said at the beginning, I'd rather hear from you to add to my homework list, and I'll turn it over to.
I'm sure there'll be questions for what the federal government is doing. So thank you for the presentation. So why don't we move down to Norman? So I know you're doing some amazing work trying to support folks coming out, working with my good friend Malcolm Young.
Yes.
And so, but you're also a former consumer of some of these services. So give us a little perspective on how you see, Norman, sort of this reentry process. What is it, what are folks getting in the district that's helping support, and what are some of the needs that we still need to work on from your perspective?
Okay, well thank you. First, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to come before you to see my youth that I work with under Director Lacey perform. Some of the young males especially that you normally see are very caught up in their pride and their toughness as we do when we're growing up. And how to see them perform and to see them act, and the young ladies that to see them sing and to see them happy and not inside an institution and doing their arts, and that was a beautiful thing. It brought me a lot of joy. Marc just used a very unique word when he said that I had a chance to consume some of the programs. It was very unique, and thank you for that. I'm formerly incarcerated. I served 24 and a half years for a nonviolent drug offense. President Obama gave me clemency in 2015. Since being out, I've been fortunate enough to get involved in the reentry process. Number one, I started out first several panels at the White House and getting a chance to deal with the Obama administration and doing so many things there, having a chance to meet Director Lacey and Deputy Director Linda and the whole DYRS staff, and to let me come in to work with the youth and all of these things. I mean, my head has not stopped in the last 2.5 years of being involved in reentry, studying myself, studying people, working with the adults, to working with the youth. One of the unique things that I've come to see is where the problem starts. And to hear the youth talking about I matter, no one's listening to me, and then to sit back and go in and have one-on-ones with them, and then the many nightmares that I've had in the Bureau of Prisons with creating classes at different institutions that I go through, and to hear Cherryl speak about some of the classes, anger management, this and that, and then to be a part of those classes, teaching those classes, and then to find out where listening to the youth and some of the horror stories that I have to die with, listening to young guys coming into my cell and rooming with me, because I would always welcome younger people to come with me so that they don't become a part of the prison culture that would eventually destroy them. And to take them in and to spend time with them, and then to find out the fragileness of the households that they come from. To listen to the ages where they 12 and 13 and watching them now under the custody and the love of DYRS and to hear them share things with me that I would have to realize that when they're my cellies or were my cellies at 18 and 19 and 20 with 45 years to life, 86 years, all of these things, and they asking me, Norman, where do I start at? And not to have an answer for them because of the fact that they're so shattered. And to now have a chance to be dealing with the adults and listening to them and to have their pain never heard before, to never be recognized before, getting older, 30, 40, and 50 years old with this pain that they have lived with so long, and then to come home and not have the services that speak to that pain is not a good service at all. And what I mean by that is that when I'm on the telephone talking to someone from the Bureau of Prisons or correlating with them, trying to prepare them for reentry to come home, because this is what I do at early parts of my day before I go to the juvenile system. I have to now shift my mind to understand that I spent a lot of times with people and their development was arrested. And they were older people who had juvenile mindsets. And now to go and to deal with them and help them come out of what they are stuck in, and then have to go deal with a juvenile who's actually a juvenile. How do you wrap your mind around the services that are needed for people who need this type of help? It takes very unique diagnostics of the person, because a lot of people think that one size fits all, and it doesn't. Housing is important. Jobs are important. But number one, you have to ask the person what is really needed for you, because if you don't deal with the uniqueness of what that person needs, he or she can go to work, but they're still damaged. So these are the very important things that we have to, as a city of Washington, D.C., we have to find out what is going on with this person in order for them to uniquely be able to come out and be an asset to society. Because if we think that we can send us to work or to give them housing, and that is enough, but don't understand that if you do 20 or 30, 15 years, how do you deal with a relationship with your child? How do you deal with a relationship with your mate? How do you learn how to now go from a BOP budget of spending $75 to $100 a month with telephone, cosmetics, commissary, core links, all of these things, and then come out to society and have to budget or deal with your first check in the amount of $1,500 when you go inside a Giant, go inside a Shoppers, and have to shop, and your cart is barely full, and yet that's $200. How do you wrap your mind around adjusting to that? So we have to walk people through these type of things that they're going through if we're going to deal with them properly and setting them back and handling them the right way, because one size does not fit all. And that is a unique reentry tool that we have to take people through. Speaking with them, hearing them, and not just cramming them in a corner. They need a job, they need this. No. When we come out of doing a lot of time in the BOP, first you have to understand what was the issues that we went to jail with. BOP and any other prison are unnatural environments. So if you go in with issues and the unnatural environment nurtures the unnaturalness of that and those issues, you come out with those issues. And you're older, you're more stuck. So the question would be, how do you handle people when they come out with these issues in order to make them now a productive citizen back into society?
We have a lot of work to do.
So I'm going to open it up to questions in just a moment. So start thinking about your questions and your comments. But I want to, that was a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Marc.
So Norman, when you talked about, right at the end, you talked about how do we, all the issues that folks bring to the table, right? You talked about, the young people talked about, right? The pain and, being shattered, right? You talked about this as well. My question is, for all of you, is, typically in a justice system dynamic, we measure success by recidivism, right? But you just laid out a whole range of things that are so critical to think about in order to have someone even think about how they can be successful, right? To navigate a world that has changed, right? For somebody who had been incarcerated for a long time, and for young people who are changing so much, right? That they're dealing with the world changing and trying to figure out themselves. So my question to you, Norm, and to all of us, so how should we be measuring success, right? As a, justice system, as folks who are working with folks who have come in contact with the system at various levels, what are the types of things we should be thinking about, maybe beyond just recidivism, to think about whether we're being successful? If you have any thoughts on that, and others, but I'll let you take the first crack at that if you want.
Well, from my experience, that's an excellent question. Success has its different dynamics. Because if I have mental illness and my mental illness is preventing me from being able to cope, then one thing that has to be understood is that success for me would be to get some mental help. If I was to be able to get some mental help and get that barrier out of my way, then I can be able now to cope better, and then my successes will change. But number one, I have to deal with what's preventing me from moving forward. So that's why I say that success changes, because everyone has their own issues. And if we don't understand that everyone's issues are different, then we will be in the way and would not know how to gauge success, Mark. That would be my answer for that.
That's great. Others want to jump in on that? See?
So I think adding on to Norman's piece, I said it a little bit earlier, it's a community. And the more that we really think about it as a community, oftentimes, and as one of my partners here, we often have the responsibility of a whole city, right? And so when you think about it, they tell us, you need to be responsible for ours, the recidivism numbers. And for us, we often say back, but it's a community responsibility. So to the point that Norman raised earlier, it's not a one person or more so a cookie cutter approach. Understanding that as part one, but then also understanding part two, the more that we have the community engaged in a meaningful way, as well as families, then we know that it's going to something, because our responsibility stops once the men and women leave out of our care, right? However, when we talk about reentry starting from the beginning, the person comes in, as we stated a little bit earlier, even with the family reunification, sometimes the families are fractured. Sometimes there's some healing that actually need to occur. And so if we really talk about this and really unpack it, as the BOP representative stated, we have a lot to do, but the reality of it is we have to understand it in the context of we, as opposed to just DOC or just DYRS or just even the individual, because when you really think about the trueness of community, it is that. And it is something that we've lost the art of understanding that, again, I think that's one of the things, unfortunately, we have to help to reimagine, because part of it is that we talk about is people need to get a job and people need to get housing. And I think it's deeper than that. Sometimes people aren't really ready for that, because to your point, if you're in a space, if you left DC for sometimes for 2 weeks and you turn around, you're like, wait a minute, where did this building come from? And so just imagine being gone for a longer period of time, and not just necessarily the physical building, but also the relationships, the prices, and things of that sort. And so I think, in my opinion, I'll just sum it up a little bit. When you think about, as you stated, the beautiful art, I've never heard that before, prior consumer, really when you think about it, consumers in business, you really understand the customer. And to understand the customer, it takes a lot of work. And sometimes you change the recipe when you think about big businesses like Apple, for example, they will continuously change based off of the need and the demand of the clients. And that's something we don't do often, which is a difficult thing to do, but I think that, to the word I'll take from you, the more that we can reimagine and start doing those things intentionally, then the better outcomes I think that we'll receive.
You know,
You want to get in here?
Yeah, just-
And then we're going to...
sure, just quickly, I mean, I think, so we grapple with this all the time, I mean, because, you know, most justice systems, and I can speak about juvenile justice systems nationally, they measure recidivism in some different ways. They don't measure outcomes. And one of the unique things that you and others were responsible for bringing to DYRS was positive youth justice with a set of outcomes, developmental domains, like, and so, which is a unique thing, and so we measure those things, and we often, and Linda, our senior deputy, Linda Harley-Harper says, you know, to all of our staff, treat our young people as though they were your children. She says, but remember they're not, right? Because we're gonna work with their parents because it's about the family, but treat them as you would want your child to be treated. So how do we measure the success and growth and development of the people we love? That's why we talk about love. We don't just measure it on, they're not objects, they're not units, right? It's not just, did they get a job or did they graduate? We measure them on their wellness, the state of their emotional development, right? Their physical health, how they develop skills over time, coping skills, conflict resolution skills. What do they see when they look in the mirror? How do they feel about themselves? Having been assaulted with all of these, the imagery and the messages that they get through society and from many sources that they don't have value, that they're ugly, that they're worthless, that they're dumb, what have you. So starting to turn those things around so then they look in the mirror, they see something that they love that's beautiful. So that sounds like, you know, poetic or corny, right? And how do you measure that? Like, how do you write that on your report, you know, that you have to hand in to justify your existence? Like, that's one of the challenges with this field, that we're asking the wrong questions, or at least we're not asking enough questions. So I think the way to measure success is to put on the lens that you would measure the growth and development of anybody that you care about. And then it becomes complex, doesn't it? And it becomes nuanced. And it becomes clear that it's not going to be a straight pathway upward, but it's going to be like all of our lives, right?
So I'm gonna
Very quickly.
And then you said questions, then we really want.
I just want to piggyback on what Director Booth and Director Lacey said. Not only are our customers the men and women who are incarcerated, but our customers are also the family members of those men and women. And getting feedback and input from family members and from the men and women who are incarcerated is very important in measuring outcomes and measuring, you know, our effectiveness.
That's great. So I think we have a mic over here, and so folks, questions or comments? So we've got one right in front of here, and just let me know, catch my eye, put your hand up. Thank you.
I heard you address the community and the person getting out of jail. But what you seem not to address is that most of these folks getting out of jail is going home to grandparents. And they're so removed from what the young folks are getting out of jail, thinking they want to do, and grandma trying to steer them to eat cherry pie and they want sweet potato pie. Now, I'm 73 years old. And if one of my grandchildren got out of jail and came to live with me, I wouldn't have the slightest idea beyond how I raised their parents. And to me, when you get sassy, I pop your butt. You get sassy with me. Now, that might not work no more.
None of us are going to get sassy. Because I'll just speak for myself. But I hear what you're saying.
I'm just saying how us elderly are dealing with it. You need to address the elderly. You need to tell us how to deal with our loved ones when they come out. Because you're addressing the family, but you're forgetting who that person is returning home to mostly. But their mother, their grandmother, and if they're getting out of the adult jail, their parents is elderly. And we still treat them when they come across my doorstep. In my house, is my rules and regulations. You obey or hit the pavement. And that's not helping the person that then came out and need to help. For one thing, you haven't told them how to help them. You address dealing with a lot of stuff, but we need specific information for the elderly. Because what you're talking about for my daughters to deal with is far different from me. See, because I be to slap them in the mouth, they would not speak to me with disrespect, whereas she may be talking there and what have you. But you ain't told me not to slap them in the mouth.
That's a great perspective and question. Who wants to, I see Clint
One of the things,
somebody
I
else.
think is
Thank
such
you.
a great point. I mean, it's so important because true justice then, right? Again, the level of investment in achieving our goals, I think, needs to be increased overall, overall. And that means engaging the family. That doesn't just mean, making a referral, but that means spending time with mom, with grandma. And so one of our programs that we've been fortunate to be able to start is called Credible Messengers. And so with the young people in the DYRS, they have their own mentor, their own credible messenger mentor who's there for them. But we provide that same service to the family. So now we just had actually a mom testify at a hearing, and she, in her own words, talked about how she has somebody now who comes to her house, who checks on her, who helps her get where she needs to go, groceries or to the doctor or just to visit. And she jokes how even sometimes it's annoying, like here she comes again, but that there's this constant engagement to help talk about what's going on with young people now, or to help out, right? And to help the young person also develop how, look, you're gonna live here, this is how it's gonna go. That type of relationship building that, Norman talked about, like when I come home, how do I know how to deal, even with my own loved ones, and how can they deal with me? And that takes time, and that takes people being there, helping it to happen. We can't just release people and say, here, go be successful. I think your point is so important, and what we're doing is one step towards that, but I think we're hoping that we can grow, that justice systems overall will start seeing this as an important part of their work, that their work doesn't end the day that somebody walks out of their institution, that they can have the opportunity to invest their money into the community. That's what we're trying to do, and so we believe that our role, we don't think our role is to fix people, right? Or even, we don't think that we have within us the power to rehabilitate people. We can be part of that process. We can start that process. We can invest in that. But we also have to invest in the people and the places where our folks are going.
And that's the grandma.
So we've got here, and then why don't we start here in the second row, and then back in the fourth row. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Precious Porter. I'm one of the drama therapists that work with the kids that did the production. And one of the things I realized... I realized working with our young people, when they go out, they're going directly back to the same situations that they were in that brought them there. And it's like when I'm talking to them and trying to get them to do that map visions and what you're going to do, it's always heartbreaking to me to hear them say, I'm going right back to the same hood. I still won't have the food I need. I still won't have the money I need. I still won't have what I did. And I will be doing what I did last time to ensure that I eat. One of the stories that the young man shared, he asked the judge to send him to prison because he had nothing he needed on the outside. He had no type of support he needed on the outside. So to him, going to prison was going to be what he needed to be able to lay his head down and have some place to sleep. But then when he's in prison, he got into a whole bunch of other trouble and a whole bunch of other things that he did not bargain for. So I'm going, what are we really doing, you know, to help these kids once they're released, once they get out of there? And where do we find the programs that we can give them to? When I'm walking up and down my street where I live, I run into most of the children that I've worked with behind the bars. I'm glad I'm one of those persons that they like, because I've seen them stealing and doing other stuff, and they be like, you know, Ma P, you all right, Ma P? And I'm like, yeah, but you're still wrong. I'm gonna see you again next week. You know, and it's disheartening because that's all they know. Like when you were talking about arrested development, you know, this one young lady went into prison real young. She's about 30 years old, but she's stuck where she was when she got locked up. And so I'm the type of person, I'll go above and beyond to try to help you, because I want everybody to do what they need to do. But we can't save everybody. Then it's like, where are the programs to help? Where are the things where we can help them? Where are those programs? Where are the programs that I can't go back to the hood? So where's the program that maybe sends me to somewhere else so I don't go back, even if it's not the best elite spot? Can I at least go somewhere where I'm not involved with this clique of people that's going to put me back in a program next month because you sent me right back to my same neighborhood? And that's all I got.
Anybody want to?
Well,
That's a tough one.
that's a tough one, and it's the reality that we grow up under. And the sad thing about it is that even in the work that I do in the daytime with Project New Opportunity, these are the same questions that are being raised, because people don't just pop up out the wombs of their mothers being crooks. There are conditions that draw and push you there. Because number one, the first law of survival or of your own life is to make sure that your needs are met. And when they're not met, to what extreme are you going to go to have them met? So until we allocate the appropriate amount of money and create the appropriate type of programs that are needed to change the realities that we come up under. Because I talk to guys all the time, and I say, man, what? He said, man, this is the language that we use. Slim, I gotta make it. And then when you come up and you talking to grandma, and you come home to grandma like this, and you see that grandma, we're not supposed to be going back home to grandma in her 70s. We're going to go back home to her under her rules and under her regulations. And then as a man, you come out, you can't get a job. Where's your manhood at? So these are the harsh realities that black men and men of color wake up to every day. And we have to stop acting like there's an elephant in the room when we talk about the realities that we're confronted with. They hurt, they're real, and we don't have an answer for them.
So I know we've got, I'm going to say 2 more questions, because I'm going to try to stay on time. Is that right? And so, and I think, Norm, thank you for sharing that. And also, everything you said is absolutely right. One of the challenges is, and I think Quincy alluded to this, is if we just look to the justice system for the answers to those things, right? That's like, we have to have the full community and all the government agencies who are talking about these issues when people are coming back into our communities, and obviously doing the upfront work so that people don't get sent away from us. So let me question here, and then a question here, sir, and then I think we'll try to squeeze maybe one more.
Yes, my name is Marcia Davis. I'm a supervisory community supervision officer with CSOSA, and I wanted to make more of a comment. One of the comment that I wanted to make was, with our offender reentry, one important piece, Director Brown, is the collaboration that we have with your employees at the Department of Corrections. I work in a mental health unit with females who are assigned to supervision. And being able to send over a fax to the jail to get a copy of their mental health evaluation, their assessment. I know you have a unit that will connect them back to a core service agency before they are released. Helps us a great deal. A lot of times I can send a fax and before I go sit down, I get a response with either their mental health assessment or their TB test. That's very helpful because we don't have to send the women in the community again. We already can start off fronting. Mr. Lacey, with your department, one thing that I see that's very important is that you engage the parents. You have the Parent Engagement Center where you try to educate the parents so that they can educate their children. I've heard very recently you had a civil rights trip where you sent the parents to Montgomery, Alabama to participate in the march across the bridge. So that's very important for our clients because a lot of the women have lost custody of their kids. So they're working very hard to try to regain that custody and rebuild the trust with their kids. So educating them helps the family. One of the ways that we measure success with our mental health population is that we measure them staying engaged with their core service agencies. So we can keep them engaged with the core service agencies where they're constantly getting the treatment and the medication that they need. A lot of our women are successfully completing supervision. So that's one way that we can measure their success.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing.
Yes.
So thank you. Right here, sir, and we got the mic coming to you.
Hello, thank you all for being here. Norm, good to see you. My name is Kelvin Manners. I run a peer-to-peer reentry organization that works with returning citizens from incarceration and veterans, which means I'm both a returning citizen from incarceration and a veteran. One of you were talking about measuring of success for individuals. And to that, I just really wanted to just throw my hand up. I wanted to jump out in the aisle. Because one of the things that we use to measure success for individuals is their involvement. How excited are they on the next step? How are they answering the questions that are asked to them? And how are they adding to them? Because the thing that is so important is their contribution to it. I just said that I run a peer-to-peer reentry organization. So we are actually the evidence of the returning citizens who have come home and been successful. But Kelvin was a drug dealer. Other individuals have had other different charges. So these are the individuals who we outreach to within the communities. These are the ones that we go to. I don't go to someone who was a bank robber. I go to those who have had my lived life experiences because we are able to reel them in initially with our story, just by talking about where we were and associating with that. As we began doing that, then we have the opportunity to allow them to talk about where they are. And that's when individuals are a lot more transparent and the barriers or the walls begin to drop down and they talk about what their challenges are. And then we work with them through some of the cognitive tools that you mentioned to help individuals to believe, and there we are, that they can too. As we are continuing to example the help. One of the questions that I want to ask is how many peer organizations or individuals are you actually using? I'm talking about individuals that are trained, that have come home from incarceration, that have this background, have this passion, and are going forth in our example in this. Because one of the pieces, again, is always has to start with me. And then I have a new obstacle. I have my family, and then I have another option. I have the community. And these are the things that we focus on piece by piece with individuals. And of course, the word is being patient because not everybody, it's not a cookie cutter and not everybody's moving along the same path at the same rate. But the things that I do find in every individual is as they become significant, they are a heck of a lot more motivated and enthusiastic. And that shows how the attendance is at the different groups and the attendance of different groups around the city. Thank you very much.
Great point and good question.
Just quickly, you said it best, very clearly, like the whole basis of our Credible Messenger initiative, which is overwhelmingly returning citizens and others who had shared life experiences from the communities where our young people and families live. And so that initiative is built on them being transformative mentors to our young people and to the families, to the caregivers, and trying to spread this restorative justice work in the community. We currently have 60 credible messengers in our initiative. It's one example of a greater movement. There's other people like yourselves out here doing that great work. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And so I think maybe the last question.
Good evening. My name is Jordana Cunningham. I am a program coordinator with the U.S. Parole Commission. Not so much a question, but I have what I call the gift of ideas. So as people are talking, I just have so many ideas that come to mind. So when the woman up front was talking about coming home to these intergenerational gaps in folks who are coming home, I thought about groups like Al-Anon. So who would be best to tap to say, so maybe we need to start having groups like Al-Anon for families who we know there are people coming home from under DYRS or out of BOP or DC jail. So there are groups that are forming that are talking through what is it going to look like when this person's coming back to my home. We're talking about what it looks like to deal with someone who is 60 years younger than myself, or dealing with a 40-year-old man who come home to his 80-year-old mother's home. So those kinds of things, that's one. Second to that was with dealing with young people who are going back to their same home environments. I know a lot of times we like to, nationally we put a lot of blame on crime rate on the justice system. The justice system isn't doing enough. And we don't often put any kind of report card on how communities are doing. How are you all taking care of the citizens who are coming back into your communities? So also thinking about having community conversations. Like, so you have people in your area who we need to wrap our arms around, and they may not be related to you, but they are the community family. So having conversations in communities about what that looks like and how can we help people who are struggling in our own communities. Also to that, when she even talked about not having enough to eat. So again, I don't know who would tap, I don't know if that would be like your faith community, but if there is someone who is struggling in DYRS, who's under supervision and their home life isn't great, are there families who can, like mentors, but like a mentoring family where these are places I can go 3 days a week and go have dinner with this family. Or some of these things where maybe you can't be a fostering parent, but there's a place where I can go and even ask for resources. Like, families who can say, I can give a $200 budget to a child in need. If they need to wash clothes or to put money on a Metro card, that there are families who are not necessarily connected by blood, but connected by community.
That's great. Great ideas. Thank you so much. And thank you for your participation, for being here this evening. I'll say two things real quick. I think it's a privilege. Clinton talked about the information that we have these days to really start to understand the history that we're dealing with that has led to this mass incarceration that we're all working against. You talked about the new Jim Crow and 13. I'll commend and give a shout out. I know we've got the head of the Public Defender Service here and some former public defenders. Our own James Foreman Jr. just named, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, a Pulitzer Prize winner for his book Locked Up, which is about DC, right? So we now have one of our I think helping us to understand how folks who have been trying to push this ball forward, how sometimes it's a step forward and 2 steps back, but we got to keep pushing it forward. So I commend that to add that to your reading list from one of our own here in DC. And then the last thing I'll just say, I think I've had the privilege of watching Director Lacey talk about these issues, not just here in DC, but around the country. And I think, just think for a moment, the last time you were engaged in a conversation about the justice system where the word love was said so many times, or even once, right? And that's the conversation. That's, when you look at the young people who are in front of us, how could we not talk about wrapping our arms around and supporting them? And so I think we are doing a lot of good work. We got a lot of work to do. But I'll just say what I've seen as this conversation has started to percolate beyond the district and nationally, Director Lacey's comments have allowed others the space to start to talk about this in the ways that we're having this conversation here tonight. So I think I appreciate that. I appreciate all the good work that everyone's doing here and for you all being out. I think the engagement piece that you talked about, like this is the type of thing that's the way we should be measuring success and then taking this in the next step. So thank you again. Give all to close us out.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Marc Schindler, this illustrious panel. This was a rich evening. I am just pleased and proud to be a part of this community. What you've heard a lot is community, our village. This is a village, and all of us tonight are working towards kind of this more perfect system. And so it is a work in progress, but what I'm really clear about is that we are collectively committed as Director Booth, Director Lacey, Ms. Litsey, and Mr. Brown really help to exemplify we have to be in this together. Right? This is not just, it's not just a me, it is a we. And so what we as the CJCC are really interested in is making sure that we hear from you. We had some homework from Congresswoman Norton. So I'm gonna try to follow up with a little bit of a request. And that is for you to give us feedback. You have some comment cards. We want to make sure that we hear from you on if there are, what other issues are important for you to have us convene our village to really discuss. This meeting actually emerged from our last public meeting where there was a call and a request to really look at programming at our correctional facilities. And so we look to you, our community partners, our agency partners and stakeholders to help really shape and inform the dialogues that we're facilitating in the community. Thank you so very much for your time, for the commitment that you exemplify, and thank you again to the panel, to the young people at DYRS. Thank you, DYRS, for all that you're doing and for the opportunity to just witness a bit about that. I want to thank again Director Booth and all that I know is going on at DOC. There is a lot going on well in the city. And I also want to acknowledge BOP. We have to be said that they are present and they are participating and a partner. And so in partnerships, we're holding one another accountable, but the first step is to be present and to really be about the business. And so I want to acknowledge that and thank you for heeding the call to be that partner. And so with that, have a great evening, safe travels.